come on in because this is going to be my Ready to Love recap review. We're going to talk about these exit interviews with both Blake and Suanne. I watched both of the interviews on Ages and Stages. At first, I was going to do a separate recap video on each of the interviews, one on Blake, and then I was going to do a separate one on Suanne. But let me tell you, Blake is a model witness. Blake is a model witness. Any person who represents Blake in a case, they're going to love him as a client, because what Blake is able to do is he's able to not release any information. I'm telling you, this man is like a vault. You have to pull information out of him. And if you are not good at asking questions, if you're not good at digging in and getting to the meat of things, you could spend a whole hour with Blake and come back with barely anything, because that's kind of how I feel about his interview. I really didn't get a lot out of it, so I didn't feel like there was enough for me to do a whole video on it. And honestly, after I watched the Ages and Stages interview with Suanne and Simone did the interview, I got a lot out of that. In fact, I learned more about Blake in Suanne's video than I learned about Blake in his own video. Let me tell you, this is like the trial. This is like the trial of the season, because you got Blake, who is the defendant. You got Jeffrey, who's the accuser. You got Suanne defending Blake, so she's like the defense attorney. And then I'm gonna put Morgan in charge of Jeffrey's prosecution case. She's gonna be the prosecuting attorney. So you got defendant Blake, accuser, plaintiff Jeffrey. You have the defense attorney, who's going to be Suanne, and you're going to have the prosecuting attorney being Morgan. That's what I'm going to go with. That's the scenario I'm setting up with. And you know what, people? We better be glad we have these sort of after interviews, because we learned in Suanne's interview that they filmed the reunion prior to any of these people even seeing any of the episodes. So hear me out. The reunion was filmed prior to any of the cast members seeing the episode, seeing everything that we saw. So all that nasty talk of Jeffrey on the confessionals, all that nasty talk Jeffrey would say off camera and to other people that she wouldn't say it to, none of the cast members even saw any of that, because the reunion was filmed prior to them actually seeing the episode. So when we're getting these interviews, we're actually getting a more authentic reaction to the actual show, because they've actually seen the show. When the reunion comes, I don't know what the reunion is going to be like, because they're not going to be able to really respond to things that these people said off camera. And as we know, the off-camera confessionals is where a lot of the shade is thrown, is where a lot of the daggers are thrown. It's where Jeffrey does all her real dirty work. Because remember, Jeffrey doesn't like to do as much of the dirty work in front of the men. We know that, because Jeffrey has a facade that she wants to put on. So if you notice what Jeffrey does, is Jeffrey only does her snapback, her mean talking, her talking back. She only does it in particular moments. She does it in the ladies' lounge, right? And then she also does it in her confessionals when men aren't around. When men are around, she likes to keep it soft. She likes to keep it dainty. She likes to keep it feminine. She doesn't want the men to see any of that side of her. But when she's in those confessionals, when she's in that lady lounge, when she's off to the side, that's when she starts all that nasty talk. So even in Suanne's interview, Suanne said, I didn't really know that this advocate Sue thing was a big deal. At first I was like, Suanne, how could you not know that? How could you not know it was a big deal? And she was basically calling you advocate Sue all the time. Because then I started thinking about what Suanne is correct. Because although Jeffrey did call her advocate Sue to her face one time, and she said, well, what's wrong with being an advocate? I am an advocate. The majority of the times when Jeffrey was talking about Suanne, calling her advocate Sue, the majority of the times it was off camera in the confessionals, or she was talking to other people about Suanne. But we're going to get into that. But we're going to need to refresh everybody's memories of what this case, because that's what I'm calling it, is about. Who is the real liar? Who is the real liar? Was it Blake or was it Jeffrey? You already know I think it's Jeffrey. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to need to roll a little bit of the tape so that we can refresh our memories on exactly what we're here for. So it happened very early on. It happened actually in episode 3 in the deliberation room when Jeffrey made the original statement about Blake, because this is where, if anything, we want to talk to Blake about. This is the thing we would have wanted to talk to him about. And before I play it, I do want to say this one thing about Blake. Before I play it, Blake came on the interview, and he did it with Rashid. And what he said was, Rashid asked him, have you watched all the episodes? And you know what Blake said? Blake said he only watched episode 1 and 2, and then he stopped watching it. Now think about this, people. We are now on episode 11, which means what Blake did was after he watched episode 1 and he didn't see what he liked, because he said they really weren't portraying him the way he wanted them to portray him, and it was a lot of shenanigans, he stopped watching. And here I go again. Here is Blake coming to an assessment too quick, too soon, and casting people out, shutting the door, and locking them out the club. Remember my last analogy I used last week, that Blake is like a bouncer at a club, and he gets to see who can come into his club. Everybody should have a bouncer at their club. Got it. We all should be the bouncer of our own club, which is our life. We should decide who comes in and comes out. But what I'm telling you about Blake is Blake thwarts the system really, really fast, and he throws people out, because what Blake does is Blake likes to look at what's wrong, and he quickly identifies what's wrong, and he casts you aside, and he doesn't give you a chance. This is what I think about Blake. So when Blake says he stopped watching the whole episodes after 1 and 2, he actually missed all the good part. Because what has happened to Blake's character, or image, I should say, is in the beginning, a lot of people were really hard on Blake. They didn't like Blake. They didn't like the words that were coming out of his mouth. But as time grew on and we started to realize that Jeffrey is a liar, people started to ease up on Blake. People started to feel a different kind of way about Blake. Now, maybe does that mean they like Blake? They want to go out with Blake? They would date Blake? Maybe not. Some people do. But some people say, well, at least I've gotten to the point where I don't dislike him anymore. But here's the thing about what Blake does. Blake interrupts the process of getting rid of people too soon. And what he actually did was he didn't give the show a chance. All of us, we kept watching the show. Here we are on episode. We kept seeing it through. Even though I do these reviews at the end of every episode, my opinions are evolving with the show as I watch the show, which means even though I may have an opinion after episode 1 or 2, I'm still going to watch the show. And as I go along, my opinion changes. Just like in the beginning, I had a different opinion of Morgan. By episode 11, I have a completely different opinion of Morgan. So I think what Blake does is what I've always said, is that he is the bouncer at his own club. He controls who comes into his club, but his rules are too strict. He doesn't really give people enough of a chance. He really does need to give people more of a chance. I don't know what he's protecting, where his rules are so hard and firm, but his rules are so steadfast that he doesn't like the good part to come in. So he closed the door and watching the show after episode 2. But had he stuck around, he would have seen how people's perception changed, how there were more people on his side, all of that good stuff. So I really would say that he really should do a better job of that. I know he's probably not going to change his mind because he is a stubborn person. He's, like he said, we know now that he has a serious military background. He comes from the military, plus he's in corporate security. All these things probably add to what his personality is like. But I'm telling you, I don't think this is what he was in the beginning of his life, because he's so disciplined now. He's so disciplined now. It makes me wonder, how can a man who's so disciplined now have had how could a man who's so disciplined now had to have been so undisciplined in the protection of his sperm and having 3 kids with 3 different women? That's the disconnect. So I don't know if Blake has evolved to this person, but when I meet a person who's had 3 kids by 3 different women, that means they were undisciplined in their birth control. They were undisciplined in controlling their flesh in order to make sure that they maintained a better, more intact family unit than having 3 kids with 3 different women. That's what I'm saying. When you have multiple babies by multiple women, that points to an area of being undisciplined. Even in your birth control, even in your choice of women, even in your choices, that points to an area of you're being undisciplined. You're acting off emotion. You're just in there with the woman and you having a good time, and boom, there comes a baby. I know he got married to one of the women, but now when you look at Blake, where he's so calculated, he's so determined, he's so dog-minded, I think he's evolved into this person. I don't believe this was the person he was 10 years ago. He was probably disciplined in his career, being in the military and corporate security, but over in his personal life, he was more wild and out. That's why I always say, a lot of times I would say that Blake a hypocrite, because although he talks a certain way and holds women to a certain standard, I didn't see that behavior in his past. And I don't know if you guys want to say I'm judging him. It's not a judgment. I'm just saying that the way he led his life probably 10 years ago isn't the way he's leading his life now. And there is a difference. So this Blake that we're seeing on camera now, I think it's a new Blake. I don't think it's the Blake from 15 years ago. I think the Blake from 15 years ago was a different person. And you know what? We all evolve and we all change, which is okay. And he needs to incorporate that into his life. He needs to incorporate that into his story, because where Blake comes off as if he woke up like this. He woke up the person he is, disciplined, logical thinking, no emotional thinking. So when he's going over here having conversations with people who are maybe still talking emotionally, what he does is he looks down on them sometimes, I feel, and criticizes them too much, when the truth of the matter is he made some of those same emotional decisions. He should speak from a point of, I can understand where you're coming from, because at one time that's the way I thought. But now that I'm older, I think a little bit differently. I'm thinking a little bit more logically. Then that gives you empathy for someone that's not where you are, as opposed to you're talking about where you are and you're kind of almost putting them down. That's what I think about Blake. So I really hope that he talked about a lot in terms of, what he's learned from this, how he needs to speak to a person in a different kind of way than what he did before. He did talk about a few things he's learned from the show, and that maybe his speech can be a little bit different going forward with different women and in dating. So I was happy to hear that. He talked about that he and Morgan finally did make up. He said by the time that they reached the house, the retreat, he and Morgan were talking and having good conversations. He said Morgan was even crying on his shoulder over the whole shenanigans that was going on between Tony and Lyndon. And I think at that time, probably was able to happen because Morgan started to get more information from other people, started to see Blake for who he really was, and not just simply seeing Blake through the eyes of Jeffrey. Okay, because like I said, Jeffrey hired Morgan as her hitman, as her attorney, and Morgan blindly followed Jeffrey because Morgan had also had sort of a little run-in with Blake, and she blindly followed Jeffrey. And I think by the end of the season, Morgan started to think a little bit more for herself and started to realize, you know what, I'm starting to see some inconsistencies in Jeffrey's story, and starting to realize that maybe Jeffrey's story wasn't completely the truth. So maybe I need to give Blake a little bit more consideration, a little bit more slack, which opened the door for them to have at least a civil conversation. And she wasn't talking no more about this stuff that you're a cancer. But anyway, let's go ahead. I want to refresh everyone's memory, because I had to refresh my own memory on exactly what did Jeffrey say about Blake, so we could now put this on the stand and decide once and for all who is the biggest liar on the show. So let's go.
Blake expressed to me that he has to do this process because he already has found his girl. He was like, you're my dream woman. And so every date I'm going on, he wants to know what time I'm getting done. Who's your top? I'm beginning to feel like I'm in a relationship without,
Not being in one.
Yeah. I haven't been able to breathe due to Blake. He's like, I've already found my girl. It's you, and I hate to tell these women what they want to hear. I'm not interested in a man like that.
Okay, so that was the testimony of Miss Jeffrey. Miss Jeffrey talked about all the things that Blake said. He's found his girl. He found his woman. Now, we've had enough tape on Jeffrey. We've had enough tape on Blake. I've already said who I think Blake is. Remember, what Blake does is Blake eliminates people fast. He eliminates people fast. He's slow to warm up to you. He's slow to choose you, right? He's actually the complete opposite. He doesn't choose you early. What he does is he shuts the door on you early. He kicks you out the club. He over scrutinizes you. This is what we know about Blake, and he has been consistent on this through the whole show, and he's even talking about it here. Now, what do we know about Jeffrey? What we know about Jeffrey is Jeffrey wants to be liked by everyone. Jeffrey has told us out her own mouth that she is very competitive, very competitive. We have seen Jeffrey on these Ages and Stages interview talking about, why does everybody on this show think I'm the wife? Because I'm the wife. We've seen Jeffrey buck up. We've seen Jeffrey believe that everybody should be in love with her, should want her. She's the prize. She's everything. Every man on here needs to like her. And when a man doesn't like her, she bites their heads off. When DeMario stopped liking her, she bit his head off. Okay? This is what we know about Jeffrey. We know about Jeffrey that one of the reasons, I know it, one of the reasons why Jeffrey kissed Mark Anthony on that boat was because she knew that everybody thought Mark Anthony was one of the most handsome men on the show. And what she wanted to show you was, look at me, the woman with 3 kids by 2 different baby daddies, no child support. Here I am kissing the finest man on the ship. She was sending a message to all those women that, guess what? You are in competition with me, and I got a really strong game. One of the other reasons why we know that Jeffrey really went on to Suann, because we kept wondering, we don't understand why Jeffrey is continually going in on Suann. What's going on with Suann? We're going to get into that later. But we find out that the reason why she was really going on Suann, not just because Suann was taken up for Blake, because she tried to make it seem like it was a sister code. Like, how could you take up, I'm a woman, you're a woman. How could you be taken up for this man when he's so-called abusive and stalkerish, and I'm a female? She tried to make it seem like she was mad at Suann because Suann was almost taken up for an abuser. But we find out that really why she was attacking Suann is because Blake had a connection with Suann. So really what she's doing is she's actually in competition with Suann, and that's the real source of her. That's the real source of her attack. We're going to talk about Suann's interview later, but I'm digging in even more why Jeffrey really didn't like Suann. And it has nothing to do with the fact that Suann took up for Blake. One is she was jealous of Suann. She was jealous of Suann because Suann was really the real deal compared to Jeffrey. Jeffrey fakes nice, nasty. Jeffrey is nice, nasty. She fakes like she's feminine and all these things. But the truth of the matter is she's argumentative. Just like she did on those confessionals, just like she was arguing trying to argue with Suann. If you think about it, who was the person who was the most feminine on the show? Who was the person who didn't want to get in conflict? Who was the person who tried to walk away from it? It was Suann. Jeffrey ran to conflict. She's cussing out DeMario. She's telling off anybody that she can. She's telling off all these different people. But yet she's the feminine one. She's the non-argumentative one. She's the one that doesn't want any drama in her life. Absolutely not. She was only that way in front of the men, but anywhere else, she likes to come towards the attack, just like she did with Simone. She came to Simone on her own YouTube channel, in the comments, on the videos. She likes to come towards the fight. And what Jeffrey realized about Suann was actually the real deal. Suann was really the real feminine person, and she figured that out. And what I'm also figuring about it with Jeffrey is that Blake actually dropped Jeffrey sooner than Jeffrey wants to admit. Because Blake told on his interview channel, with Rashid, that there was a point in time on day 1 when he was talking to Cynthia, and Jeffrey was coming all up to him, rubbing on his back, interrupting the conversation he was having with Cynthia. And Blake said something about, oh, I'm having a conversation with Cynthia, but I guess if you want to sit down and talk, you can. And Jeffrey took offense to it. Jeffrey was upset that Blake was not turning his attention away from Cynthia at that moment and to her, and she got jealous. And he said, next thing I knew, I was in the deliberation room and they were telling me all these things that Jeffrey had said about him. So like I told you, anytime someone shuns Jeffrey, doesn't believe her bull crap, what she does is she puts you on the chopping block. During the season, I felt like maybe Blake had learned even more information about Jeffrey, because that's even brought up by the prosecuting attorney Morgan. Morgan brings up the fact when she was chewing out Blake at that little sit down. He says, you're talking about what did she call it? She called it a double life. She said, I hear you talking about the double life of Jeffrey. Because what Blake had figured out where there were two Jeffreys, and he started calling it a double life. And then that's when Morgan went in and said, you know what, I think you're the cancer. As opposed to saying that Jeffrey's the cancer, I think that you're the cancer. So Blake had already figured out about the double life of Jeffrey. Blake had already figured out that Jeffrey was two different people, showing one thing but being a different person. And Jeffrey figured out that he knew. And that's why Jeffrey put him on the chopping block and went so hard. And then she eventually started attacking Sue-Ann, and she wouldn't let up off the Sue-Ann. And it wasn't just also because that Sue-Ann was liked by Blake. Because remember, Blake had more than one connection. This is the other thing he points out. He actually had a connection with Cynthia, and he had a connection with Sue-Ann. He had two connections. So why so much heat for Sue-Ann, Jeffrey? Why not even more heat for Cynthia as well? Why didn't you come for Cynthia as well? Because I'm telling you, there's something about Sue-Ann that really rubbed Jeffrey the wrong way. In a lot of ways, Jeffrey could look at her life with Sue-Ann's life, and she could say, here is Sue-Ann, the real feminine woman. Here's Sue-Ann, the real feminine one. Sue-Ann had been married. Find out Sue-Ann was married to an Australian. She has two kids with that Australian. That Australian is also an attorney. So I know he's paying child support. I know he's paying child support. So now we have two women. Jeffrey says she's divorced. So is Sue-Ann divorced. Sue-Ann has two kids. And you know what? She's getting child support. She's an attorney. She's in the spotlight. And now Blake likes her. She's feminine. Okay. A lot of men said that about Sue-Ann. The only really bad thing people said about Sue-Ann was that she was a little bit closed off. But we're finding out that Sue-Ann has been tied up in a really high profile case, defending Killer Robinson and her family. And so Sue-Ann says a lot of times when she came to the set, her mind was bogged down with a lot of more important things, which of course it would be. So as a result, she may not have had all of the energy to really cultivate some relationship. She might have been a little bit closed off. Her mind might have been somewhere else. She speaks several times that even when she was at the retreat, she was in another room on email, answering emails on the phone, talking to different people, doing different things. She was actually working. So I could see how people could get that image of Sue-Ann. But when you see her on camera and in the after interviews, she really isn't a closed off person at all. But to get back to Jeffrey, I can see why Jeffrey was jealous of Sue-Ann, because Sue-Ann actually represents everything a Jeffrey wished she were, but Sue-Ann actually is the real deal. Sue-Ann actually is the real deal. Jeffrey's over here trying to snag a high value man because she needs the money. She needs the money. And Sue-Ann over here is the high value woman. She's running around high profile cases, driving a Maserati. She really is the real deal. And Jeffrey's trying to be the real deal, but she's fake and she's phony. And that's why she puts so much energy into tearing down Sue-Ann, because she's actually jealous of Sue-Ann. She was actually jealous of Sue-Ann. And Blake had already started peeping out her game and didn't want her. And that's why she decided to go after Blake. Absolutely. That's it. Sue-Ann even tells the story that when she was throwing premiere parties, she invited the whole cast to come to the parties. She tells the story that both Morgan and Jeffrey came to the party and didn't even talk to her. Here it is, Sue-Ann threw a big old party, had media there because I guess OWN didn't throw a party themselves. She did it. She got sponsors. She did this whole big old thing, red carpet, did all these kind of things. Sue-Ann did all this, graciously invited everybody to the event. And then you have Ghetto Jeffrey and Ghetto Morgan who show up and don't even talk to the host of the party, but come up there and eat the food and drink the alcohol and sashay on the red carpet and take pictures, but don't even walk up to the host and say, thank you for inviting me. Tacky, tacky, tacky. And now that you know, or now that we know more about the real personalities between Jeffrey and Blake, there is no way I believe Jeffrey's story, because Blake closes the door on people. There is no way Blake would have said to any woman, I'm not even going to say Jeffrey, any woman, you the woman that I want. 100% you are the woman that I want. Absolutely not. Because Blake vets women, and he is not going to tell a woman after one conversation, two conversation is you're the only woman I want. I just want to go away and be with you. That's a lie. That's a story that Jeffrey would make up in her mind because that's what she wants to happen. She wants every man to think about her that way. She even wants Mark Anthony to think about her that way. Now here's another plug, another reason why I know Jeffrey problem with Sue-Ann was deeper. Another thing that Sue-Ann said on her interview was that she had the most dates with Mark Anthony, which is very interesting. She said, I don't even know why we kept being put on dates because we had established very early on that we were not a good fit because Mark Anthony made it clear that he didn't want to date a woman with kids. He made it clear to me. And we knew right away that we weren't going to be a good fit, but we ended up becoming good friends because we had so many dates. And we also saw that on the tarot card reading that Sue-Ann and Mark Anthony had their readings together, and they alluded to it then, or they said it then, that they had become good friends. And Sue-Ann said she would give Mark Anthony advice on his dates or who his connections were, which is another reason why Jeffrey will be threatened by Sue-Ann, because now you have the case where Blake likes Sue-Ann, not Jeffrey, and now Mark Anthony has to respect Sue-Ann, and Sue-Ann is talking to Blake about his connections, which bothers Jeffrey because now the man she's trying to reel in is actually talking to a woman she's jealous of. You get all the reasons why Jeffrey would hate Sue-Ann, and she wants to act as if it was some girl code broken, like you're taking up for this guy even though he was abusive to me and said all these mean things to me. No, it was pure jealousy. Pure jealousy. So just like that tarot card reader told Jeffrey in her reading that, yeah, there are people who are interested in you, but it's all based on lust. The attraction of Mark Anthony to Jeffrey is all based on lust. Lust. It has come from too many different people's mouths. It has come from the mouth of the tarot card reader. It's come from the mouth of Sue-Ann, because even though Sue-Ann didn't want to say it, the question was asked, well, if Mark Anthony didn't want to date women with kids, why was he dealing with Jeffrey? And Sue-Ann just sat there and said she wasn't going to give up her friend. She was not going to give up her friend. They did ask Blake, well, why didn't you address what Jeffrey said when you guys were sitting down on the boat? And what he said was, because really what's supposed to happen is what's said in the ladies' lounge isn't supposed to get back to the men. We find out that what was said in the ladies' lounge, what Jeffrey said in the ladies' lounge, technically, they said it's not supposed to get back to the man, but it got back to Blake. More than likely, it's Sue-Ann that told Blake. I'm not going to say definitely that's who told him. It could have gone around different ways. I don't know. But it got back to Blake. So when Blake was confronting Jeffrey on what she said, he actually says the reason why I didn't want to tell her what I heard was because it was coming to me by third-hand testimony. Remember, he says, I was hearing this from other people, and so I didn't want to say what I heard because then Jeffrey could just sit back and say, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. So what he was saying was, I didn't want to go back and forth with what she didn't say. I really just wanted her to tell me what she said. But Jeffrey's also skilled at evading questions and doing what she does, keeping up her facade. So you had two people who are really good at not answering questions. You have Blake, who's actually very good at not answering questions. And you also have Jeffrey, who's good at evading questions and flipping situations around. And therefore, the conversation wasn't going anywhere. It was just going around and around and around and around. And it just became useless. But in the end, there is no way I believe Jeffrey's story. Absolutely not. Now that I know the character of Blake, now that I know who he is, and now that I know the character of Jeffrey, there is no way in this world that I believe that Blake, the bouncer who kicks everybody out the club, who's always pointing out what's wrong with everyone, who looks for all the red flags in you first, will go to a woman after only knowing her for one conversation and say, you're the woman I want to be with you. I don't even want to talk to anybody else because you are perfect for me. That's what she said. You are perfect for me. Absolutely not. In the end, when I look at the two women, when I look at Jeffrey and I look at Sue-Ann, I would actually call Jeffrey the seductress. I don't even want to really call it feminine because it's really fake femininity. It's fake femininity, actually, what it is, because I don't think she's really feminine. I think what she is she's a seductress. Even when that's what I believe that she is. Jeffrey is a seductress. I believe that Sue-Ann, even in her demeanor, even the way she talks, even in the way she conducts herself, the men she wants, I believe she actually is feminine. And I think what she does is, I think she has a good balance, because one of the things that Sue-Ann is aware of, she's aware of how men perceive attorneys. They actually perceive attorneys as tough, rough, critical. They can really get in on you. And that can really hurt them in their dating world. Even Simone admits it, that it's tough for female attorneys to date because of the image that female attorneys have. And I think what Sue-Ann has been able to do is she's been able to say, I can be an attorney and I can be tough in the courtroom and I can do what I need to do. But at home, I don't want to be that woman. I would rather a man take the lead, make all the decisions. I have to make all these decisions in the work world. I have to make some really tough decisions. I have to go hard. I don't want to be that person at home. I'm willing to let over and take over the reins and have a man who wants to make all the decisions. That's why she didn't have a problem with Blake. Blake, to most women, would seem bossy, but what Sue-Ann is saying, if you want to call it bossy, okay, but I like that bossiness, because what it is he takes charge and he takes decisions off my plate, and I don't want to have to make those decisions anyway. And Jeffrey is actually the opposite. She tells you she wants you to take charge. She tells you that she wants to follow you. But if you really listen to what Jeffrey does, is when a man finally takes lead, she tells him, no, I don't want you to do that. No, don't do that. She did it several times this season, that when the DeMario wanted to check her and tell her, I don't think that you should do this, Jeffrey pushed back on him. Because Jeffrey actually doesn't like to be told what to do. Because if you listen to what she says, she said, Blake is controlling, he was controlling me. DeMario was controlling, he was trying to control me. This is what she said about men. But a woman who wants a man to take charge and to lead, they wouldn't be saying that. They will be inviting a man to take lead. They will be inviting a man to lead her. She's actually saying the opposite. What Jeffrey is that she's a seductress. She lures you in with her body. She lures you in with her words. She lures you in with her looks. And then what she does is she actually pulls you in. And the truth of the matter is Jeffrey actually wants to control you, the man. She doesn't want to be controlled. She doesn't want to be led. She actually wants to be the leader. But she lures you in with this false sense of femininity. And what she learned about Sue-Ann was the real deal. Sue-Ann wasn't a trick. She wasn't bamboozling men. She wasn't doing the okie doke. She was the real deal. Sue-Ann said, I don't lead with my accomplishments. I don't lead with what I do. I don't lead with any of that stuff, because I'm interested more in an authentic connection with a man. Sue-Ann has money, has had money, whatever the case may be. She's saying that's not her priority. She says she does want she wants to be intellectually stimulated by her mate. But she isn't necessarily stuck on degrees and all this other kind of stuff, because there's lots of men, as we know, lots of people, period, who have degrees but have nothing to talk about. So she says that's not necessarily the primary criteria for her wanting to be with a person. She says she liked the leadership of Blake. In fact, she was saying during the elimination, she said their bags was already packed. She says when they got eliminated, by the time she went back up to the room to pack her bags, Blake had already packed the bags. She said Blake had already packed both her bags, hers and his, and said, make dinner reservations for 9 o'clock because I'm going to be up out of here. She was like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? He was like, I make reservations for 9 o'clock because I'm going to be up out of here. And she said Blake stuck around for maybe another 45 minutes to an hour. We didn't see it to the next episode, but she said Blake stuck around for another 45 minutes to an hour. And then they went and had dinner together. She said they was up out of here. They talked a little bit about this stuff, about a lot of people calling Sue-Ann a pygmisha throughout the whole season. I didn't see anyone saying that in my comments. I'm happy no one said that, because I don't look at like that, like Sue-Ann. I think sometimes people just because you're trying to get along with a person, all of a sudden you call it a pygmisha. I don't like what that word has become. Just because you're trying to get along with someone, just because you want to like them, you want them to like you, and you're trying to figure out how can we blend our personalities. All of a sudden, you're a pygmisha. That's not what a pygmisha used to be. I don't know how it's evolved to this. But anyway, she says, I don't know where people got that from about me. I'm not that type of person, which I don't believe it is either. She says, maybe it's because of the way I am. And even Simone had to say, I just think that a lot of people nowadays call women pygmishas if the women are feminine and they want to be able to get along with a man. All of a sudden, a lot of women start saying, well, you're doing anything to get along with this man. Because I guess people believe they should be able to stay who they are and the man should adjust to them. That's what a lot of people think, that, hey, I can stay whoever I am and I shouldn't have to change anything and the men should all adjust to me. But the minute I adjust to the man, I'm going to pick Misha. So I'm glad that both Suanne and Simone cleared that up. I'm really glad they cleared that up. Suanne said, I'm attracted to a man with a planner and a schedule, a man I combine my calendars with. She's like, because I'm a busy woman and I love a man who's proactive and likes to do that. She said that's one of the reasons why she liked Anthony, because Anthony has a whole planner. He's organized. And please let me clear it up, because y'all corrected me to the goodness, to the good point, because I never really knew what never knew what Anthony did. I thought Anthony was just a nurse. I didn't know what kind of nurse he was. I was like, I thought he was going to become an RN. I didn't know. A lot of you dropped down in my comments and you set the record straight, and you should set the record straight, that Anthony is a whole nurse practitioner, or NP, and y'all corrected me. And then I even went back and looked it up as well so I could educate myself. And it said that a nurse practitioner is really one level below a doctor, just like you all said. The nurse practitioners can even prescribe medicine. And I should have known about it, because I had a nurse practitioner before, when I had a surgery before, and my nurse practitioner did did prescribe me medicine, and she was a nurse practitioner. But I didn't know that Anthony was a nurse practitioner. I didn't remember what his title was. So Anthony is a nurse practitioner, like everybody says, literally a one step below a doctor. He's very organized. He's got a schedule, just like he told Mercedes, which is also probably another reason why Mercedes said that she wasn't ready for Anthony of the world. She should have got ready, or Mercedes should have got ready. Because if Anthony was anywhere interested in Mercedes, and Mercedes says, I wasn't ready for the Anthonys of the world, then Mercedes should have got ready. Because if Mercedes is trying to date Mark Anthony because it's where she is, Mark Anthony is more on her level, she missed her opportunity to level up. She missed her opportunity. Women, back in the old days, this is actually what would happen. Men were leveling women up. Men were increasing the lifestyle of women. It was never a thing for a man who had stature to date a woman who maybe wasn't at his level, but then he would raise that woman up to be in his level. It was almost like a lot of you are younger, you may not remember the story of My Fair Lady. It's the idea of a man who's well established, has a good job. What he does is he doesn't have to get a woman on his level. He can take a woman who has good potential, who he feels could fit into his life, and he almost takes that woman and he levels her up. That's Mercedes. What Mercedes said was that Anthony wasn't on her level, because Mercedes probably still wants to go out here, have some fun, run around, and chase after Mark Anthony, who I don't believe really even likes her. And what she really missed was she missed her opportunity to level up with Anthony. Now, I'm happy for Anthony and Cynthia. I hope they make it. But young women out here, you need to learn how to level up. That when you have men that come around like an Anthony, well established, he almost making doctor's money. Sure, he's got one child. Maybe that is new to you, because you would have to become a stepmother, but you should meet that child, figure out how involved that mother is. If the mother is a good mother, it's not like you got to do a whole lot of duties, because she got a mama. If her mama's competent and does a good job, or is enough, what more work do you need to do? I don't know. But there is some work, but you really need to evaluate the situation more, and you need to give men like Anthony a chance. You ain't going to want to be out here in the club your whole life, Mercedes. At one point in time, you're going to want to settle down, and then all of a sudden, you're going to have to go find a man to settle down with, when you had a man who was ready to get involved with you and settle down with you. Mercedes missed her opportunity to really give Anthony a chance. And I think she did it because she felt probably Anthony was a little boring. He was too regimented. He was this. But Anthony is actually the type of man that a lot of women need to look at marrying. He's a lot of what a lot of women should look at marrying. And Mercedes missed her opportunity to level up. So I hope Cynthia is older. She's wiser. That's why she ain't sleeping on Anthony. Cynthia's older and wiser than Mercedes, and she's like, oh no, Anthony's a good man, and I'm not going to miss my opportunity to be with him. So I hope they make it. I hope they get together. I hope it lasts. I hope it works. But Mercedes missed her mark Mercedes missed her mark. But also, though Sue-Ann said she liked Anthony, she also said that she got a little mad at him because I guess Anthony went back and talked about how when she and him, they went on like a dancing date. So Sue-Ann said they never really showed that date, but they went on a whole dancing date. They was dancing. I don't know what the dance is called. I don't think it was soap opera. It was something else. I don't remember what they said it was called. But I guess it was kind of like a move, sexual dance. And Anthony must have said Sue-Ann was dancing with me like she had sex with me. So we come to find out that Sue-Ann is Caribbean too. So she's part Bayesian. We find out that she is, I think she said from Barbados. Yeah, I think she said someone is from Barbados. And then someone else from is from another island, another Caribbean island. So she's full on Caribbean. She's full on a West Indian, born and raised in South Florida, but both of her parents are West Indian. But I'm glad I watched this interview. If you guys haven't watched it, be sure to check it out on the Ages and Stages YouTube channel. There's two videos, one with Blake that Rashid did and one with Simone that she did by herself with Sue-Ann, and I thought it was really worth it. And I'm glad I watched it, especially now knowing that when the reunion comes, they're not even really going to be able to address. They're not going to really be able to address what was done on the show because the reunion was taped before they even had a chance to see the show. And in fact, I'm a little bit even more perturbed because they really couldn't speak to a lot of things because the show hasn't completed airing. So one of the things about the reunion for any of these reality TV shows, it's a way to reflect back on what happened during the season and now to get everybody's assessment. Well, that's not what the reunion is going to be like on Radio Love because they haven't even seen the show. And now, even in these after interviews, they even can't really talk openly and honestly because one, they haven't seen all the episodes, and two, they're still under this, non-disclosure, gag order because they can't talk about things that may happen down the line with the rest of the episodes in the reunion. So I almost feel like, dang, are we going to need other interviews after all the episodes have aired, after all the reunion has aired? Do we need to go back and have even more interviews with this cast so we can really get their real true feelings? Because the way the order is going, we're not able to get that. I feel kind of cheated. I want to get to a point where there's no gag order, there's no non-disclosure, nothing of that, and we can have open and honest dialogue and interviews with these people without them feeling, well, I can't tell you that. You'll have to watch the rest of the show. You have to do this. Oh, I didn't know about that. I haven't seen that episode yet. I don't like that. I don't know. That's another thing I'm not liking about the format of the show right now. I don't know how you fix it. I don't know what needs to be done. I don't know, but I want it where it's no holds bar, gloves off, all the real deal, real skinny, and everybody can really say what they really think. That's what I want to hear. But that's it, y'all. Tell me what you think about if you saw the interviews or my review. Drop down in the comments. Say hi to me. I'll talk to you later. Bye.